welcome to the December 10th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase 11, 12, 13, or 14, if it's which level, also if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs, that information is helpful, and also which operating system that you're using. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could refrain from repeating the questions, we'll go through all the questions chronologically as they are asked. And we should, several hours after the live stream ends tonight, we should have an index of all the topics with timestamps, so you can navigate directly to particular questions without having to wade through 4 hours of live streams. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that wonderful website. We have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just wanted to make it a better community experience. So we'll give a special thanks to them. An extra special thanks goes to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So you could check that out. Lots of great links and tutorials and files to download that could help with your Cubase experience and your Steinberg experience. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm presenting from outside in the United States, outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Yassian Trebi asks, can I delete my trial license in the Steinberg Activation Manager with the recycle bin icon soon? So generally, the concept is that you would have one trial license and that it's not going to be deleted. So that you don't just have, we don't really intend for the trial versions to be run multiple times. So you could run the trial version one time. So if you're trying to reset the trial versions, then that's probably not going to work. All right, so we have Plentien checking in from South Africa. Thanks for joining us. We have Tim K joining from Zeist in Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Mark Rabin's dog Stella and any other pets that are nearby. They're learning about Cubase. All right, we have David Griffiths says, hi Greg and friends, becoming more firmly entrenched in believing Cubase is far superior than Logic every time I have to deal with it at college. Not one for Dog Wars, but honestly. All right, we have Jahian L. Price says, greetings from Granada Hills. He says, Granada Hills, California. Says, understanding the logical editor and macro is much better. Thanks for all the live streams. So you're welcome. Yeah, once you start using those, you get to be like a real power user. All right, and we have Andre says, looking forward to joining today. Big shout out to all from Dusseldorf. Thanks for joining us. We see Jazz Dude on. We appreciate all of his efforts. We have Stefan just checking in from Sweden. We have Uno Memento from Finland. All right, and we have Beltram from Sweden saying hi to everyone. All right, we have Jan from Stockholm, also in Sweden. Manfig checking in from Santa Barbara, California. Beautiful area. We have Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. We have Al Bulger checking in from the UK as well. We have Val checking in, Y42 from Vienna, Austria. Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. All right, Tony Trunzo, just checking in from Australia. Thanks for joining us in the middle of the night. Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas, Nevada. All right, so we see from Val says, how can I automate modulator parameters, and where do I see it in my project window for drawing it with the pencil tool? All right, so let's go ahead and come over to the modulator. All right, so let's say just draw an event in here. All right, so all right, let me just see if I have something that might be sending. All right. Let me just see if I can. Okay, so let's get to our modulators here. All right, so if we want to, so let's say I'm going to come over here and just adjust our LFO on our filter here. Okay, so when we do this, we can now so we can just see right here our modulator for our filter cutoff. So if we wanted to adjust the modulator, like the automation for the filter cutoff. But once we just kind of come right over here, we could just, again, automate those parameters just right there. So we could just see that filter cutoff automatically. And if you just come right over here, so we could have this kind of playback live. Sorry, it's not louder. Let me just. So we could think of that as kind of automating the filter, but if you wanted to write that information into the track. So now as we play. So we could have kind of the parameters. If we go to like what the modulator is, what it's controlling, and then so we have that controlling the filter cutoff. So if we want that to automatically and just have the LFO control that. So you don't necessarily need to have like this as automation data. You could just have it automatically. It'll do those particular steps all the time. All right. All right, so we have, as Farita says, hello, Greg, greetings from North Carolina. I have a problem. Whenever I save a preset of a custom-made drum on Groove Agent, I can never find it. Where are the presets saved? So if we open up, let's say, a Groove Agent, so let's say I have this kit. All right, so if we come over here, we could just say we want to, we'll go to our preset management and we'll say save preset. So let's call this December 10th, 2024. Okay, so I will go ahead and cut the kit from the pad. So we have this kit selected. So let's come over, we'll go to media, to user presets. We'll see VST instrument presets, and we'll see our December 10th, 2024. I'll drag that over. And now, so even if we wanted to just come right over here, drag the preset over, and now when we open up the instrument, all the settings, even though we just had cut that pad. So again, your user presets for the instruments will come over. So if you go home, we'll see user presets, VST instruments, and then if you wanted to just, you could choose which particular instrument that you want it to, or just you could see all the user presets right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay, so we have Michael Marshall says, when using Spectral Layers Pro in Cubase 14 Pro, Windows 11, after using unmixed song module, drag each layer out to its own track. After bouncing each track, source track still seems to control the bounced track. All right, let's take a look at it. Okay, so say I have this song here, and I have this unmixed already, so I'm going to go to Spectral Layers. I'm going to now select, so we have kind of our original source, so I'm going to select the vocals, guitars, drums, keys, what it's taken. I'm going to drag all these out at once. We'll put them to different tracks. All right, so now if we come over here, let's mute this. So as we do this, this will often kind of just take out the different elements from here. I'm going to, let's just say bounce selection. We'll replace the events. So as we come here, we just, so we have kind of our full mix here. So that's with the original source material track. Mute it. Let's see if we solo just this track here. So that's the original track. And those are all the different stems. Says this source track still seems to control the bounce track. So let me know. I'll keep this open. But we can see that if we, let's see, if we remove this track now, we still have all of our. So it seems like everything is kind of extracted when that track is muted or taken away in a project. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Michael. All right, we have Blue Jedi checking in from Manchester in the UK. Thanks for joining us. Okay, we see Recyclop checking in from Finland. We have How Do You Daw also checking in from Finland. All right, we have Mark Toll, says newbie here. It's a Brit in the States. And we have Doro checking in from Cologne. See Al just knowing I pronounced his name right. All right, we have Danny Martin checking in from Fate, Texas. Thanks for joining us. We see Martin from Germany. We have George checking in from a wintry Germany. All right, so we have Dennis Simpkin asks, hello, Greg. Dennis from Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm using Cubase 14 on Silicon Mac. Could you please review how to set up color schemes? Okay, so if you want to define and set up colors, if we come over here, we go to our project colors setup. And here we can see like the default colors. So we have 16 colors. And if we wanted to actually come over and double click, we could adjust the colors. So if we wanted this to be a darker red, we could have that set up as we see fit. And if we go to our options, at this point we could, once we tweaked, we could save it as a color as our default set to be used in other projects. If we wanted more colors to work with, we could say I wanted to have 32 basic colors, and we could have 128 tints of those colors. So we could now come over here. We have the colors. We could go through, your 128 colors if you wanted to. And employing colors, like as you start projects, how to work with that is if you go to the preferences and we go to user interface, we'll see track and mix console colors. Usually by default, it may be just a default color, which is gray. I usually have it set to use previous track color +1, so that if I added 16 tracks of audio, they would increment the colors as the tracks are being added. Now, also working with colors, some questions that we often get with this is, okay, maybe I want to colorize the track. So if we want to colorize track, if I click on Control or Command right here, we could see our color wheel kind of pop up. So we can see our colors. So Control or Command and double click, or if you want to, in the inspector, Alt or Option, we could double click, or just while holding down the Alt or Option key, we could scroll through the colors using our mouse scroll wheel. And if we wanted to have track colors that were independent of events, so say like this part of the song, we could also use the color tool, and I could have a track color, but I could also have event colors that can override the track colors as well. So sometimes when people say to me, it's like, oh, I can't colorize the track, it could be that there's an event colorized, and you go, okay, I want this track to be yellow, and then it doesn't turn yellow, it stays the same color, and that was because an actual event was selected, and an event selection will override the color selection. If there's no events selected, then we can colorize the tracks however we see fit. So just based on the selected tracks. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. All right, so we see from George who asked, is there a way in which I can make Cubase 14 show me all the active modulators on the channels, or is there an easy way to spot onto which channels a modulator is inserted? Okay, so just do a new project here. Okay, so let me just add modulator on this particular track. Okay, I was trying to see if there's any indication on the tracks itself that there's a modulator on it. And I guess maybe if we leave, so say we don't have a modulator here, we have a modulator there. So if we activate the modulators section and leave that tab open, we could see which track has modulators and which doesn't. So this track doesn't have modulators, this one does. So if you leave kind of the modulators tab in the inspector open, we could do that on the channel strip so we could see which tracks have modulators and which do not have modulators. All right, Achilles asks, is it possible to insert time between my verse and chorus in specific bars to make a longer verse? Okay. Let's say I wanted to insert time right here. So I had these two events, and let's go ahead and I'll colorize these so it could be easier to get a sense of what's going on. Okay, so if I want to insert time and kind of move these events over, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Command and Shift and use the range tool and say I want to insert like 16 bars. So I want to insert this amount of time and move it over. So, and I use the Command or Control key plus the Shift key so that we could globally select all of our events. So I'm going to select my range tool here. We would now go to Edit, to Range, and we would say Insert Silence. And now those events have been moved over to the right. So once we have the range set, go to Edit, to Range, and say Insert Silence. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. Wonderful to see John Koskian from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And John A. Walker is sending seasonal greetings or sessional greetings to everyone. All right, Nick has popped in to whack the like button. We hope you're feeling better. All right, we have Sounds Like Matt just saying hi from Chicago. All right, we have Michael Pierce on from Grand Chapel Studios outside of London. Okay, so we have a question, how to fix the latency issue of MIDI keyboard in Cubase. So generally, you have to figure out kind of latency can come from a couple of different sources. So it could be, so if we go to open up an instrument, so I'll just, excuse me. I'm going to get something to drink and clear my throat. Hang on. Sorry about that. I'm kind of fighting a bit of a cold. I feel fine. Just my throat's a little rough. All right, so now when we play a particular instrument, we don't really have any perceived latency. I will open up my virtual keyboard. So as I click, and latency can come from a couple of different areas. So one is if you get to your studio setup, you want to make sure that you're running probably like an ASIO driver. You're not running like a Bluetooth device, can have high latency, but like the ASIO driver that came with your audio interface. And once we select that, you can go to the control panel and you could adjust the buffer size. So the higher the buffer size, the higher the latency. So I click here, it's going to be delayed a little bit. And if we wanted lower latency, again, we could select the audio interface, go to the control panel, and we could minimize the latency right here. So when we do that, so that's one method that we would get latency on. Let me just make sure. Okay, and we can see what our input and output latency is at like 13 milliseconds. I'm just going to check my connections here real quick. All right, so that's one way of dealing with latency is to adjust the buffer size. Now, something else that causes latency is when we have plugins on a particular track. So when I come over, just adjust. So when we have plugins that are instantiated on a track or in the project, we could see what those can also cause latency. So let's say if I come over to my inserts here, and we go to our inserts on the audio channel. So let's say we come over, and one of the things that we could add when we go to our setup sections is a latency monitor. So as we go to add plugins in our project, so let's say we go to add the vocal chain. So as soon as we add the vocal chain, we could see that that plugin is instantiated 236 milliseconds of latency. So when we play note, now it's going to be almost a quarter of a second delay just because of that particular note being triggered. So make sure that you don't have like plugins that are causing the latency. And one way, if you have a lot of plugins that are causing latency, is you could click on this little button in the lower left-hand corner, and this is called constrained delay compensation. And if you do that, what this will do, once it's turned on, it could take plugins that have a certain threshold of latency and automatically bypass those plugins. So you could try that so that you don't have to go through like 100 tracks to find the latent plugins, but you could see what the latency is on each channel. So it's going to be caused by plugins when you're playing in real time from a virtual instrument, or if you're tracking, you'll have this latency that could be caused by plugins, or it could be the latency that's set by the buffer size of the audio interface itself. So check those two things, and you can see in the control panel what the buffer size is for your audio interface. So those two things should help. So again, you can see now when I am playing, we get kind of a odd delay. And if we bypass this plugin, and put that plugin back in, so we see very responsive. We throw in plugins that have a lot of latency in the system, and now when we get a play, I'll move the mic close to my mouse click, so you can hear that that's almost a quarter of a second late. So check your plugins, and also check to make sure your buffer size in your audio interface is set correctly. All right, so we have Tarek checking in from Qatar, or Qatar. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have a question from Recyclop who asks, I use mainly stock plugins. Is there a major difference between the channel strip plugins and respective VST insert plugin? So no, just presented in the same, it's the same parameters, just presented in a different format. It gives you a little more flexibility. So for those that aren't familiar, if we come over, we can choose to, if we have an audio track here, we could have plugins that are part of the channel strip. So we could have our standard compressor. We could have de-esser, EQ, or studio EQ. We could have Magneto 2, and let's say brick wall limiter. So we could have this presented in kind of a almost like a 500 series rack paradigm. But if we open up the capabilities here, let's say we go to our dynamics and we open up a gate that will have kind of the same functions here. We may have a little, additional functions for graphics and metering, but the functions, if we ran these as plugins versus the channel strip, it's not going to change the sound. So the sound would remain. So if we come over here, we could just say, let's go to just the compressor plugin. So we open that up. We can see that even when we go look at this in more detail, some of the compressors we could open up will have kind of the same functionality. So no difference between those two other than the signal routing and signal flow possibilities. All right, so Plentian asks, please show how to separate Groove Agent drum MIDI tracks to separate tracks in Cubase 13 using dissolved parts. My Cubase 13 now makes only one track. Okay, so let's add an instrument track here. So do Groove Agent SE. Okay, so now I'm going to just take a pattern. I'm going to drag, let's say, this pattern over. And this pattern has a number of different sounds in it. So you see that we have, looks like just a kick. So we have 4 different sounds. So maybe a cymbal crash, a kick, snare, and hi-hat. So when we want to dissolve this, and there's no difference between 13 and 14 in this regard, but we go to your MIDI menu, and we choose to dissolve part. We're going to separate pitches. Make sure you have that. And we could just come right over here, say process. And now if we solo this, we'll have just our kick. We'll have maybe our cymbal crash. Let's see. And this track, we should have our hi-hats. And let's say snare. So when we bring these all together, so if you only have one sound in your drum part, it's only going to dissolve to one track. But, just again, make sure that we come over, select the event, go to your MIDI menu, and we will choose dissolve part, choose to separate pitches, click on process, and there you go. All right, Stephen D asks, is there a way to see the used performance by each active VST plugin? So not really, but some of them will change. So let's say you have a virtual instrument that's playing one voice versus, and the next, it's playing one voice for measures 1 through 8, and then it's playing an 8 voice chord starting at measure 9. So if the plugin is doing more work, it's doing more polyphony, those settings may just constantly change and fluctuate. So there isn't a way to kind of show that. But, I think you could quickly get a sense if you go to like the new performance meter, you could see which tracks are kind of causing a lot of performance. So if we go to your studio menu, and this had changed in Cubase 14, so we go to your audio performance monitor. So like as we want it to play, and if we're running into CPU issues, you could actually just kind of click here and go through all the tracks, so you could tell you which tracks are causing more CPU performance, but there isn't a way to kind of allocate to show how much percentage it is, because it's going to be constantly fluctuating throughout a project unless it's just doing the same exact thing all the time. All right, Nutri Rush asks, please, how can I record from my internal microphone? So I guess if you have a laptop, something like that, we would probably just come over here, go to your studio setup. If you're on a Windows platform, like here we could choose on my Mac OS, I would go to my audio system, and here I could choose my built-in audio. And when I come over here to the control panel, we could actually say, okay, my input is going to be coming from the microphone or a line in or an HDMI in. So if you're on the Windows platform, you may just choose the Steinberg ASIO driver. and that's kind of a generic ASIO driver. And that's designed to use different, like if you don't have a dedicated ASIO driver and you want to use the built-in. So generally, it won't give you like great results because the built-in mic is often capturing all sorts of wonderful fan noise and stuff like that of your computer, and hearing the CPU speed up and slow down, stuff like that. But you would just go to your audio system and use built-in audio, go to the control panel on the Mac OS, on Windows. You would just use the Steinberg ASIO driver, and that's kind of a generic driver that will allow you to use like onboard sound interfaces. And then just in the control panel for that, you want to make sure that you have it set for your built-in microphone. All right, Recyclop asks, just scroll down here. And his question is, my understanding is that inserts either before or after the fader, but is there a way to have them before the channel strip or somewhere in between the channel? So if we open up a channel, so we'll come over here, we'll open up a channel. So right now we can see that when we go from left to right, this will be our channel, our signal flow. So we go from left, so we have inserts, channel strip, and then we have the EQ within the channel strip, then the sends, then the outputs. If we want to change the order within the channel strip, we can just simply drag and drop the different components here. And if we wanted to add a plugin pre or post fader as an insert, we could come over here, we have pre-fader, and we could move this green line so that these plugins are now post-fader. So if I want to come over here, we could just have post-fader inserts, pre-fader inserts. Now, if we wanted the channel strip to come before the inserts in the signal flow, we'll see this little icon here just to the left of the strip, and then we could swap the order of the channel strip, the signal flow order, so that the channel strip comes before the inserts, or the inserts comes before the channel strip. So you have a lot of flexibility there between which comes first, the signal flow order within the channel strip, and for your inserts, whether they're pre or post fader. And we got pre or post fader also set up for our sends as well. So if we wanted to add a send effect, we can just come right over here. Let's add like a shimmer reverb. And then if I wanted to right click, we could just switch this to pre-fader or post-fader just by right clicking on each individual send. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay. All right, so we see Cubase 14.01 Mac OS X Sonoma. I use headphones during a session. Cubase switches to MacBook Pro speakers. All of a sudden, I have to unplug the headphones, and it takes some talic to get sound back. So if, one of the design decisions that Apple has made is they treat that it's not just a line out or headphone out or speakers. There are kind of actually 3 different devices depending on how the device is connected. So it doesn't automatically switch it to route the audio to the headphones or to the MacBook Pro speakers. So if the headphone cable gets moved at all, it could switch that for you. But when it's switching it, it's because it's not detecting something that's connected to your headphone jack. All right, we have Mr. Dali67 checking in from Denmark, and on his, where he's saying it's a lovely night. We have Roland checking in from Sussex, England. All right, so we see Michael Marshall says he'll drop an email with his issues running into maybe with the Spectral Layers unmixed because it may exceed the 200 character question. All right, so we have Jack Bourne just saying, hey, and appreciate you and Steinberg and Jazz Dude and the whole gang. So helpful, love from New Hampshire from me and my pup, Ollie. Thanks for joining us, and we'll give Ollie a big woof. All right, so we see, please, how can I record from my internal microphone, Mac? All right, so let's come over here. We'll go if we have our built-in audio. And then you could, so you should be able to kind of switch back and forth between the control panel here. So but let's say if I go to my sound settings in Mac OS, so here you want to use your MacBook Pro microphone, you could select that, and then that should be showing up right over there. So you have to kind of configure it at the OS level and then route it there. All right, so Quellen just says, hello, Greg. How can I make a backup of all my presets that I made in Cubase, even if I use third-party plugins? So, if you saved it as like a VST3 preset, so let's say if you had like your third-party plugin and we open it up here and we saved it as a preset here, as opposed to some third-party plugins may have their own preset management scheme, but if you save it as part of the VST3 presets, all those can be backed up simultaneously by going to the edit menu to the profile manager and exporting a profile and importing that profile back into your Cubase, or just you could share it with someone else or migrate it to a different computer. So if you used kind of a third party, let's see if I come over maybe like the Curve EQ, maybe. If I open this up, this is a third party. So if we used kind of, like a preset system that's built within the particular plugin, as opposed to the presets from the VST3 plugin presets, all the VST3 plugin presets can be backed up. If you saved it within a proprietary system offered by the plugin, you'd have to manually back those up. But if you save it all from here, again, go to your edit menu to Profile Manager, and then you can just simply export the profile, and all your presets will be within that profile. All right, let's go to the next question. All right, Tim Weinheimer is just saying you start using the event colorization and event renaming. It's a great help for organizing parts of a song. All right, Bratman Studio asks, hello, Greg. I've been seeing videos on upgrading Mac OS through OpenCore that lets an older Mac use a new OS version, thus hopefully running a newer version of Cubase. Do you know if that would work? So I haven't tested it. You may want to check just on the forums if people have had success with it. I know sometimes, it can be frustrating as an Apple user that you can't upgrade to a later OS version at some point. It's almost kind of like a planned obsolescence model at times, or it seems like it's doing. So I'm not sure which OS that you're running. So I know that Cubase 14 doesn't officially list Monterey, for example, I don't think, as a supported OS, but you can see that I'm running Monterey here on my Mac OS. So, but I haven't tried it yet. But you might want to just check with forums to see how people are doing. All right. So we see Al Bulger just says, why is Yamaha Steinberg not done for the live keyboard workstation throne? So I think that there's, like the motif and montage have had kind of the live keyboard workstation throne for a long time. We could use VST Live for doing that as well. So if you wanted to kind of automate your show where you have backing tracks, you have backing external instruments, backing instruments, video, chord tracks that are, like chord charts that are generated, as well as lyrics, that you could do all that inside of VST Live. Also, the vast majority of concerts that you see are running through like Yamaha digital consoles as well. All right, we have Balsa just sending greetings from Montenegro. Says, wish you all the best in the upcoming holidays. So we see George just says, thanks, Greg. So I will set up the inspector section and check if modulators are visible. So I think that will work for you. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer, Sr. from Wilmington, North Carolina. All right, and always wonderful to see Michael Teens from Weatherford, Texas. Seeing advice to get a humidifier. So I have one for my string bass. So all right, so we see Sounds Like Matt says his main work in Cubase is recording and producing vocals. So that, of course, includes things like aligning doubles, coming up with recording harmonies, exporting stems, etc. I'm about to upgrade from 10.5 Pro to 14 Pro. So, and then Price question, it says, I'm wondering if you could think of new features offhand that make those things faster. Okay. So I don't think, I'm not sure if, I guess 10 had the alignment, came in 10. So, but a lot of people may not be using it. So let's say if we're aligning background vocals. And let me switch my audio interface so everyone can hear it. Sorry about that. Somos iguales. Somos iguales. So we look at this, we can see that these aren't necessarily in time, but what we could do is open up the alignment panel. We could choose one to be a reference track and choose multiple other ones to now be the targets. And I will just say align the audio. And now as we listen to it, so very easy to kind of work with that. Now, if we're dealing with like harmonies, one of the things that's helpful, I think this was also in 10.5, but in 12 or 13 became where we could have the scale assistant. I think 13 we added the scale assistant. So if we just look for the this would work. Okay, so, in 10, there was a pretty significant update to Vary Audio. So when we want to come over here, and if we have the chord track, now, and this has been in for a little while, so let's say if we're listening to our vocal. Sorry. So if I want to take just that word, I'm uninvited, we'll take that phrase, that we can come over and let's just generate a harmony voice from that. I'll just do one harmony voice for the verse there. And I'll bring the volume down here slightly on it so that now so you're able to generate harmonies like that. Also, when we are working in Vary Audio, we could have what we call the scale assistant. So if we wanted to come over here, we could take the scale assistant and we'll just open these features up right here. And we can say, let's use the chord track as a scale. And now we could choose to do snap pitch editing so that we could only go within the scale and not out of the scale. So we're able to do that. And we could also choose to quantize the pitches to the scale. So if I have all these selected, we can now quantize the pitches to be in the scale. So those are some of the things that came, like the quantizing in the scale system, I think came in 13 or maybe 12. So those will be new coming from 10.5. But there's a lot of great stuff you could do for working with your vocals and polishing them in Cubase. All right, so Tarek asks, hi Greg, in the studio setup under the audio system audio device, how to save the configuration of the device, port system name. All right, so let's come over here. So go to studio menu to studio setup and under audio, okay, and under the audio system, audio device, how to set the configuration of the device, port system name, show as, visibility. All right. All right, let me just make sure I'm in the right area. All right, so it's right in here. So how to save the configuration of the device, port system name, show as, and visibility to preset file that can be loaded. So, once this is the selected ASIO device here, this will show all of your available inputs and outputs. So I don't think that it's really where it's going to be, these aren't all necessarily active in the project, but this shows you all of the available in and output ports. So I don't think that there's a way to save that as a preset. But let's say if we want to, most people want to be able to see all of the available inputs and outputs of their device, but I don't think that there's a way to save it as a preset. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Tark. Okay, so we see Rami Arafat. Hi, there's a strange problem. Red peak load after opening Cubase even without an open project, Windows 11 with UAD Apollo through Thunderbolt. So, it could be that, all right, and just to follow up, says my X299 i9 system handled everything with 64 to 128 buffer, but now it needs minimum 256 and above. So one of the things to check is if you are here, make sure that one, you're running the Steinberg on the Windows platform. You'll see that the Steinberg power scheme. Also make sure, there's a utility from Resplendent Systems called Latency Mon, LATENCY MON, and that's a latency monitor. So it could be like your video card is causing CPU spikes or, something else. So latency mon is a good utility to find if there is like a hardware device on the system that's causing like audio interruptions, causing your audio performance meter to be kind of spiking like it is. And I'm sure Jazz Dude has probably already posted maybe a link to the latency mod. All right, so we see from Jack Bourne, who says, my input latency is 14.9 and output is 9.1 at 512. Is there a reason input and output are so different? So it could depend upon the audio interface, and if sometimes audio interfaces may have built-in DSP, so sometimes the built-in DSP, or if you're running different effects, the built-in DSP can sometimes, on some audio interfaces, may raise the input latency a little bit higher. So if you could share which audio interface you're running, and see if you use like a built-in audio interface, if you get the same results. But that's just kind of what that particular audio interface driver is doing. All right, Perry Michael Allen says, hello from Memphis. I'm doing a lot of immersive mixing and mastering. Would you know what distributors accept ADM files? Any new ones? Thanks. So I think most of the deliveries or places are doing immersive. Kind of the delivery format is going to be an ADM file. And that ADM file is, what allows the immersive mix to be scaled to any, to all the different playback configurations. So, but I don't know. I'm not seeking personally distributors for my projects, but I think all of them would, accept an ADM file. See, Michael Teams is on top of the virtual ice cream distribution, and Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, Bjorn Carlson says, my chat field just jumped. Okay, Bjorn Carlson. Hi, Greg. I would like to use the sidechain option for Soothe 2 external app, and the team behind Soothe 2 say that in the screenshot, the person is using Logic Pro. You have Cubase, so the sidechain. So the sidechain selection will happen from somewhere else. Selecting the external input for a plugin is always DAW specific. I wonder how to set up in Cubase 14 Pro if I want to. All right, so we'll show a dynamic EQ, which I think is kind of what Soothe is doing. So let's say I want to come over and I'll just add an audio track. Okay, so on this audio track, I'm going to place an insert, let's say a dynamic EQ frequency. Okay. And then how to access sidechaining inside of Cubase is we could say, okay, I want to take, let's say, band 3 here, and I wanted to sidechain the multi-band. So we'll enable dynamics, and then when we click just to the right here, we could activate the sidechain. All right, so just click here, and we'll see, okay, we want sidechain 3 in, and then we'll see, let's add a sidechain source, and then you'll click here, and this will be the sidechain input channel. So anytime that you want to sidechain any plugin in Cubase, we could just come over. Let's say, okay, I want to come to this track. We have a compressor on it. So we'll get a black valve. We'll open up black valve. And then we could just kind of click right here on the sidechain input, activate the sidechain, and choose your sidechain source right there. All right, next question is, can you show a quick run through of using the key editor to detect what key I am in and only show the notes in the key of the song? I never used this feature because I'm not sure of the best approach. Okay, so I'll open up one that doesn't have a chord track already assigned. Okay, so we want to find the key of the song. So I'm going to take this piano, and we will go to the scale assistant here. And once we go to our scale assistant, what we could do is we'll see scale suggestions here. So it has 2 suggestions. So it's going to say G major. Okay, so now it's going to show G major, and I'll go full screen here. So again, go to the scale assistant. You'll see scale suggestions. So I'm going to choose G major, and then we'll have this little icon at the top. And what we could do is we could enable this icon, and we have 2 choices. One is to show the pitches from the scale assistant, or show only pitches that have events. So when I say show pitches from the scale assistant, I'm only seeing notes that are in the key of the particular song. So open up the MIDI editor, go to the scale assistant tab. You'll see scale suggestions. Choose a scale here, and then you'll have kind of like a filter view. So the pitch visibility, and then we could enable that and choose to show only pitches from the scale assistant. So this is only going to show us notes that are in the key of G major. So do those 2 things, and you should be able to draw any note in and have it in key. Okay, so we see sounds like Matt says I have an OP1 and MPC1 that I'd like to use with Cubase. My understanding is that the only real way to do so is to record them line in as instruments, correct? I suppose I could convert that audio to MIDI at least. So no, you don't have to do that. So I mean, you can approach it several different ways. One is you just sequence and you send MIDI information. You would add a MIDI track. So it's add a MIDI track. Let me just clear my throat. So we're going to add a MIDI track. We're going to send it out to your device, like the MPC1 or the OP1. Set the channel, and then we could send MIDI information directly from. So anytime that we would draw in and sequence MIDI notes here in Cubase, That's going to be sent out to the OP1, I assume that's hardware, and to the MPCX. So, and then those will generate the tones. So that's one level. If we wanted to take those devices and run it through VST Instruments, what we would do is come over to our studio menu to audio connections. Let's go to our audio connections and we would configure external instruments. And once we go to external instruments, we could add an external instrument. We'll call this MPC. Let's make sure I have the right model. MPC1. And we want to take the audio output, because Cubase sends a MIDI that generates the sound. We want to take the MIDI output, and you're going to need for this an audio interface with inputs, so that we can take the audio output from the MPC1 and connect it directly into the audio inputs of our audio interface. So we can say, okay, this is going into channels 3 and 4 or whatever. At that point, we could right click, we could add an instrument track, and then we could just say under external plugins, we want to go to the MPC1, and we'll say, let's make a MIDI part. And now, since the audio is coming back into Cubase, we could treat it like a virtual instrument for processing. So I could run it through all of my software effects, EQs, and all of my VST plugins on that particular track. I could also render those in place to convert it to audio as well. So you could treat it as, I want to send MIDI out to it, and then it's being combined into like a software mixer, or I want to use Cubase as the mixer and use available inputs of my audio interface and take the outputs from those instruments as inputs, define them as external instruments in my audio connections, and then add it as a VST instrument. That way I could have the flexibility of all of my processing for my VST plugins. All right, Plentyan asks, thanks, Greg. When recording Groove Agent into audio, as you showed before, is there a way to separate the toms once, since they all have one output? All right, so we'll just add all right, so there's two different ways of approaching this. All right, so, and it could be different if we're doing. All right, so I will just quickly do a drum map of this. All right, so say we listen to this now. All right, so depending on how the kit is created, so let's come over here. So let's say if we want to go to the mixer, so here, like on this kit, we could say, okay, I want my toms. So here we could say, okay, I want this going out to output 2. output 3, 4, and 5. So as soon as I go to render in place, I can now have kind of my overall. So here we'll have just this tom. So our toms will be broken down. So we could do it like that. Now another method would be just like as we did the dissolve part. Now each instrument, we go to MIDI and we select dissolve part and we separate pitches. Now each pitch will have its own instance of groove agent. So if I come over here, we select those events, and if we want to render in place, and we can see that this has now added multiple instances of groove agent. So once it's done that, we can come over again and do render in place. We could select those 4 events. And now we could just render each of those individually as well. So a couple of different approaches. You could break it down, or and that's if your instrument doesn't have the ability to kind of break out the toms. So some do, some don't. So when you come over here, we can say, okay, I want to go to my groups. I can see my different kicks and snares all kind of being broken out. But let's say if we come over to Studio Kit, let's see if that has it. Yeah, so if you don't have the ability, so here we can see so there we could see kind of our toms broken down. So, but you could always do the dissolve parts as well. All right. All right, wonderful. See the artist known as Love. All right, so Marcus Streiman just says, hi, Greg, any news with the channel strip activation bug for MIDI remote would be so important. So nothing that I could report, and I wouldn't be able to report it until like maybe the next version comes out, but I have reported it, and so we'll see if it gets resolved soon. So, but thanks for letting us know. But it's officially in the queue of stuff to be looked at and get resolved. All right, so we have Soren from Sweden just giving a thumbs up. All right, so Val is just asking, in Supervision, how can I update all the modules at the same time? The reset top right only works per module. Unfortunately, I'm missing some functions. All right, so let's take a look. So let's open up Supervision here. Get a couple of modules. Okay, so let's say we have this going on.
What did you say? You wished
All right,
it
so if we
all away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years and a day. You were the party, the big event. I was your everything. Now I'm uninvited. I'm on the outside looking in. You put the
all right, so we come over here. It's going to be
close side up on your heart. All the lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go?
okay. So let's say
Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? I'm uninvited.
yeah. So I'm not sure if there's a way to. So we could, like, when we stop. All right, so let me. So it says, how can I update all the modules at the same time to reset? Top right only works per module. Am I missing some function? So we can pause all these here. All right, so maybe if we try to hold. If you come here and hold down the Alt or Option key. So if we want to pause, we kind of hold all these settings. Alt or Option plus click here. And then Alt or Option. So it looks like you could pause them all by holding down Alt or Option here, and then reset by holding Alt or Option here. So try holding Alt or Option down and clicking there, and it looks like it will reset multiple Supervision modules for you. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted me 1 gallon of easy on the throat pure vanilla ice cream. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to having some ice cream right after I finish the live stream. All All right, Marcus Schreiman just says, and Greg, how do I make a full program backup so that I can take all my presets, user settings, color schemes, etc. when moving to another PC or for backup? So usually like the colors are going to be stored in the project themselves. But if you come over again to your edit menu and go to Profile Manager, export your profile, and then import it back into your new PC, or save that as your archive, your backup. All right, so we have ProWash DFW checking in from Texas. Thanks for joining us, Randy. All right, great to see Cornell on from the Netherlands. All right, so we see Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, I'm running Cubase 14 Pro. Is there any need for me to keep the previous versions installed? So are any Cubase functions not carried on from one version to the next? Thanks. So I don't think that there is, sometimes like when we went from 11 to 12, there was a couple of VST instruments that didn't make it, that weren't going to be updated, like Loop Mash FX, Mystic, and Prologue were a couple of the instruments, but I don't think we lost any instruments going from 13 to 14. So once you've installed, I think it's good to keep it installed like the very first time, because it will migrate all of your settings over from version 13 to version 14. But once that, and that's usually the very first time you start it, you'll see it migrating all of your preferences over. But once that is done, there's no need to have the previous versions installed. But overall, I would say they're pretty small. All right, Juno106, DJ Juno106 asks, I've got a weird problem. If I leave my Cubase project and don't touch it for a few minutes, the arranger screen goes white and all icons disappear. Says they start popping back when I drag the mouse cursor across the screen. Can anyone help? I'm on Windows 11. So it sounds like it could be maybe a display problem. So one thing to check is if you come over, check to see if you have the latest display driver. If you're running like an NVIDIA, maybe don't run it in gaming mode, but run it in like, I think they call it studio mode. You can go to preferences and on a Windows platform under general to see if you enable and toggle the high DPI settings, if that makes a difference. And also go to your studio menu to studio setup and make sure that you're running the power scheme, the Steinberg power scheme as well. So check, it's, often stuff like that sounds like a display driver issue to me. All right, so we see Rebel. Does Cubase have plugins that has vocal presets? So yeah, there's vocal presets in just about all of the plugins. So you could, as you go to, but there's also, if we had to do like one tool for vocals, and you wanted everything done in one particular area, I would check out under the vocals category, and this came in 13, the vocal chain plugin, because this will give you like, where you could cut filters, you could have noise gates, do pitch correction. This is kind of like everything you want in one particular vocal plugin, everything you'd want to do with vocals, including imager, delays, reverb, dynamic filters, compression, exciters, de-essing, and you could have more in character or more clean. So this could give you all of this processing with tons of great presets, all right here. So check out the vocal chain plugin. But even if we go to, track presets, if we go to plugin presets, you always will see vocal presets as well. All right, we see Millard Brown on, checking in from Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, wonderful to see Fly V from Vince from Winnipeg. All right, so we see from How Do You DAW says, I'm pretty new to Cubase, although I have had it for a while. I've been working with Ableton, but now 14 Pro has got my attention. So, well, welcome to the live stream. All right, and we see How Do You DAW. Their question is, when bringing in an audio file, why Cubase is changing its tempo, like the file is 95 BPM. The project is 95 BPM, but when dragging the file into the project, the file tempo changes. Check to make sure. It could be that, like, often we get this when there's a sample rate mismatch. So I would go to your preferences, and you'll see under editing audio, convert to project settings. So this way, if it's a 48K file and you're at 44.1, you drag and drop it in the file, it would automatically convert it to be the sample rate of the project. So try going to editing, to audio, and you want to, on import files, we could choose to use the settings and convert it to the project settings. So try that, and I think that will resolve the issue for you. See Jazz Dude just sending nice words after getting praise for himself and all his help. It says, he told me that I am Yoda and Mr. Miyagi in one person. I think I'm an Oompa Loompa in a world of Willy Wonkas, but thank you for the kind words. It means a lot coming from you, Jazz Dude. So, all right. Okay. All right, so we see from Impulse Music and Cubase render mixer channel. So we could render the track that's being routed through the mixer channel. So let's say we have on this particular file here, we have reverb on our voice.
You wished it all away. I'm left here for 1,000 years and a day.
So say I have.
You were the party, the big event. I was your everything. Now I'm uninvited.
So if we have all this processing going on the track, and then we choose to just do a render in place. And here we could do the complete signal path. So if we have different effects and EQs as inserts or sends, I'll just revert this since I changed it from the original. All right, so let's say on our vocal here. So we have reverb. So say we have all this processing going on.
were the party.
So instead of like thinking of it as the mix channel, we would just render in place we'd select the channel, go to the render settings, and we could include the complete signal path, which would be the sends. If I wanted to include also effects that we had on the master bus, we could do that as well. So now when I render, we could render with all of the effects. And now when we display this,
The big event, I was your everything.
so that is in essence rendering the track and is taking it from mono to stereo because it's going through stereo processing. So that way we could render the track just by using render in place. So that's how for Impulse Music it could render the mixer channel. See, ProWash DFW just says he pulled the stale trigger on Cubase and Wavelab. So it's great. Yeah, a lot of people did. All right. So you see Andre says sound jumps to MacBook Pro speakers suddenly only when using Cubase. Have no issue with Ableton or Logic or Reason. Is there a way to add the headphones as the primary stereo in out? So your headphones isn't going to be probably your stereo in or out or your input, but just your output. So, but again, you would just kind of come over here to your studio setup and choose your built-in audio and then configure it in the control panel. So Cubase isn't doing anything to change the sample rate, but make sure that when you connect the headphones that, I think the headphones don't work at 44.1 and 48K. It only works at one of the sample rates. So make sure that your project is not at the sample rates where the headphones aren't working. And that's a function of the Mac hardware. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin on. All right, so Yazian asks, can I delete my Steinberg trial license with Recycle Bin logo soon? So I don't think we'd allow you to delete trial version licenses, and that's how we know, so that people don't continuously just run a trial. Okay, so Tigerman Guitar says I had an issue. Notice when I tried to change the visual preference of the audio meters, then click apply, it didn't change it. Anyone know why? This is in Cubase 13 and 14. So one of the things to check with this as you're working with the meters is that there are multiple meter types. So let's say I see my meters here. Let's make sure I have this. So when we go to our meter preferences, so we'll come over here, we'll go to our metering appearance. All right, so we can see that this is for the channel meter. So if you're changing like the digital meter colors, now I come over here and hit apply. It doesn't have any effect. So make sure that, because you could have all these for different meter options. So if I want to change this color to red and I hit apply, Alright, so let me just try it again here. Okay, so I go to my channel meter.
I fell right through. I'd do it all for you.
So you can see that those meters just change. So you could have for all the different meters, and you want the plus 3 dB digital channel meter to be selected. So we go back to my defaults. So you could have like, 10 or 12 different meter types right there. So make sure that when you're adjusting the channel meters, that you use the channel meter. And if we're using the meters here and we're using digital scale, so if I go to my meters here, this is right now we have this set to our digital scale. So now when I adjust my digital scale here, all of these colors, so we'll hit apply. So this color, this meter color has changed, but this hasn't.
Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?
So make sure that you're actually doing the changes for the correct meter type here. So if you want for the mixers, just use the plus 3 dB digital, that's a channel meter. All right, so we see Val just says, thanks, Alt plus click was the solution for the Supervision. All right. For holding and pausing. All right, everyone give a big woof to Mark Raven's dog, Stella. Can't remember if I did or not. All right, so we see Mark Raven says, so the button on channel 2 is SSL2 plus crapped out. Due for a replacement today. He's been using one channel. Sorry to hear that. It's always a bummer. Hope it gets repaired and swapped out and it's brand new for you. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. See, Mark Raven just asking if I have a cold. So I have a bit of a cold. My wife and son have been passing it around amongst themselves for about a month. And I finally got it, so. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so you see Mihai, Anila. Hi, how can I transpose tracks beside drums in Spectral Layers 11 Pro? Okay. Revert this. Okay, so let's see if we could do this. So let's say if we select a layer like guitars, let's see if we can transpose that. See if there's any options in here for transpose. So I guess we could try to come over here, drag these out like we did earlier. All right, so let's take everything but the drums. All right, so I'm going to mute the original here. So now the drums aren't transposed, but I can just select these all. So I just selected all the unmixed events except for the drums. So now our drums aren't transposing, but all of the rest of the audio. So let me know if that works for you or makes sense. All right, so Andre just asked 14.01, is there a way to place a stock plugin which will enable to mono the mix and may be routed to a key on a keyboard for quick access? So I don't think that there's a way to do it to map it to a particular key, but if you want it to make like the low end more mono friendly, you could use the Imager plugin for that. So let's say so I'm going to go to my master here. So if we go to Imager, so then we can take the low end here. So we want to make the low end like too wide, or make it more mono, and maybe make the highs. So we can say that's the low end is too, a little too woofy, a little too wide. So we can't necessarily insert that plugin, but we could select it and open up the plugin to turn it on or off. So maybe a little too much low end. So if we want to kind of monoize the low end. But they're currently, so we could activate the plugin. We could probably bypass and plug in, but we can't necessarily load the plugin from a key command. Maybe in the future. And we see if you want to, and also it says just to check the mono compatibility. So if you're doing the downmix here, if you want to check the mono downmix, just in the control room, you'll see downmix presets. And I think there you could go to key command and switch between different keys. So let's see if I come over to my MIDI remote, just connect mine here quickly. Let's see if we could just do the down mix. All right, so we could select the next mix download. So I could just come right over here. So if we're in stereo, listen to stereo, mono. So if you're just checking for mono compatibility, you could do that and go between the different downmix presets. All right, so we see Miguel just saying, why still on 14.05? So I may have a 14.05 project, but it's a good chance that the Cubase version I'm running is 14.01. So it's just that project was saved last in 14.05. All right, so we see from 808 King just asks, hey Greg, sorry, this question came already. I don't think I hit send. Anyway, can you show how to make an everyday script? That would be useful. Thank you. So let me know what type of script. So is it a patch name script? Is it a MIDI remote script? What device? If it's a MIDI remote script, what device is it for? Or is it like a mod scripter? Is it, so if you could give a little more information, 808 King, that would be helpful for me. All right, so we see Mark Rabin sending praises about Nick and his mixing ability. So it's always a good thing to say something nice behind someone's back. So that's a good policy I have. Say nice things to people behind their back and hope that it spreads. But it's great that I think it's a wonderful feature of the Club Cubase that people have met and now collaborate together and really kind of build the community. All right, Plentian asks, thanks again, Greg. I saw you export to different folders. Can I export MP3 to one folder and wave to another? So yeah, definitely. So when we go to do an export audio mix down, we would just say, okay, where, so we see this thing called an export queue. So we want to make sure that the export queue is open. And we can say, okay, I want to do a 48K 32-bit floating point wave file. And then we're going to click on add to queue. And this is going to go into the mixdown folder. When I choose to come over here and we choose MP3, I could choose a different folder. So we'll say new folder, and I'll just say MP3. Save. So we choose a different path here, and then we add that to our queue. And I'll just do my stereo out. So add to queue. Let's do our wave file. And say, okay, now it's going to be a wave 32-bit 48K. Let's add that to the queue. And now at that point, we could just have our different formats go to different folders. Get a quick sip of water here. Hang on. All right. All right, so we see Mark Rabin just wants to give Nick super kudos. All right, so we have Hamo in 1974, just sending cheers from Finland. Hope you had a nice Independence Day celebration last week. All right, so we have Pastoral Apologetics joining from Beaumont, Texas. My chat field jumped. All right, see some discussion of bass management for clubs and mono. All right, so we see Fly V with a nice comment. Says, I love watching Cubase live and learn about my favorite software, Greg. Thanks a bunch. So we're always happy to see you on. All right, so Val asks, in the combined stereo panner, what does it mean when it turns from blue to yellow? It's a great question. All right, so, and this is a great production trick for people. So let's say I'm here. So I'll go to my master out here. And I'm going to switch this to combined panner. So when we go blue, this is our left and right. But if I keep going up, let's say I make it narrow. And we go to, returns kind of the light orange. We just reversed the channels. So now we see that the right channel is on the left-hand side, the left channel is on the right side. So if you wanted to automate a pan where the whole mix switches, so say while it's going. So we're just reversing the channels when we do that. So let's say. So we got very narrow and reverse the channels. So when you see it orange, kind of that bright orange or yellowish color, that's the channels are reversed. So it's just inverting the panning. So you could do some really cool production tricks with that. All right, so we have Jan Lee Hooker checking in from Hamburg. Thanks for joining us. I miss going to Hamburg. Hopefully I get to go next year. Timing Guitars wondering who's doing 7.1. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says, as we get closer to the holidays, Club Cubase taking days off, where schedule changes in Zoom meeting. So I think we will go up through the 20th and probably do the Zoom meeting on the 20th. I think that's next Friday, a week from this upcoming Friday, and that will be the last live stream for the year. I'm going to try to take some time off and hang out with my son while he's off, and I have way too many vacation days I didn't use this year. So I think we will go until the 20th of this year and use that, the 20th, to do a quick. That's when we'll do our Zoom meetup as well. So we'll have a holiday party. See, Tyron Guitar says, well, didn't realize you could do that with ARA. Learn something new again. All right. Jan Lee Hooker asks, Greg, would it be possible to assign the swing factor of the quantized panel to an external controller? Let's give it a shot and see. Don't think so, but let's give it a try. Yeah, I don't see it as an assignable controller. I'm sorry about that, but I'll pass along as feedback. It'd be kind of cool to have. Except you'd be using swing all the time. Timing Guitar says he really likes the Imager plugin. All right, so we have SH just says, sorry if this has been mentioned, but I noticed two things wrong in Cubase 14 latest update. It says one, automation lines are not aligned even if they are the same value. And two, cannot copy paste EQ from one track to the others. All right, so I'll try it here. Okay, so let's... So that looked like it, so the copy paste worked. We just try. So it looked like the copy and paste worked for me. So let's say if I come here, I have this, I'll just do a quick preset. Okay, so I'm going to copy the EQ setting. Let's go here, right click, paste the EQ setting. So that seems to work as I would expect. And so the first one is do the automation in the lines. The automation in the lines are not aligned even though they are the same value. Okay, so let's open up. Okay. All right, so I'm going to select this as -6. All right, it looks like I have 2 automation nodes there, so let me... All right, so this automation node here is -6. We'll say -6, I'll just type in. So they look aligned to me. So, but let me know if you see it differently. So, depending how the automation nodes are added, so as we come over here, we can see that there's automation node that's -6, -6. So it looks pretty straight to me, but let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are. And it looks like the copy and paste EQ works. So, but let me know again if I'm doing something differently. All right, Arnold Canal asks, hi Greg, I would like to use modulators on rack instruments, i.e. on MIDI instruments via quick controls. Is there a reason why modulators can only be used on track instruments, or have I missed something? All right, so rack instruments can go out, so a MIDI track goes out to a rack instrument or to an external source. So I think that most of the modulators are generating too much MIDI data to be sent to an external source. So I think that if we put a modulator on, that you would clog up the MIDI bandwidth, and that's why it's being limited to instrument tracks now. So I know that it's a VST instrument if you're running it in the VST instrument rack, but it's coming from a MIDI track, and that MIDI track could go to an instrument, or it could go through to an external synthesizer, tone module, drum machine. And so to have it work, from the MIDI track itself, the modulators are too fast for that, so that's why it's being restricted to instrument tracks currently. All right, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so Andre just says, yes, Greg, thanks. Downing mono compatibility, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. Assigning to keys on a MacBook would be a cool option in the future. So, all right, so Rad Zaleski just says, don't you think that version 14 is slower and uses more resources? I use Tau on 5 tracks, and ASIO is tripping constantly. So I've had every project. I haven't had it run any slower. So, but let me know if it's like if you had the same exact configurations in the earlier version. But I think it's been faster for most people. All right, so Tireman Guitars says that's why I love music theory. It explains the magic in music. So I think having a great knowledge of music theory makes you appreciate it and appreciate when it doesn't make sense in theory as well. You have to respect both. All right, so we got Michael Graybill checking in from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. When I render in place, it always renders mono tracks to stereo. Is there a way to prevent that? Thanks again for all your answers, Greg. Yoda, you are indeed. All right. All right, so let's take a mono track. So I think it depends upon the configuration that you're using. So let's say if I come over here and I have this set as a mono track to start with, and we choose to render in place. So we'll go to my render settings. Let's choose dry. So when I come over here, we're going to choose dry. And when we do that, that's going to be mono because we didn't render any stereo effects, stereo groups, stereo processing on it. So let's go to the next choice, which I think is the channel settings. So we go to our render settings. We'll go to channel settings, and this includes our inserts, the channel strip, as well as the channel EQs. So we render that, then that's going to be mono with those effects applied. Now, if we want to render it with this track, which is going through the stereo reverb, if we want to include like the stereo effects, or if it's being routed to a stereo group, and we choose to do our render settings of our complete signal path, which includes and basically adds our sends to that when we render, it's now going to automatically create a stereo file because the tracks, the effects are in stereo. So it really depends on what you have and for those particular channel configurations. So channel settings and dry will maintain the particular channel width, and then if you incorporate like stereo groups, stereo effects, or if it's going out to the stereo output, then if you choose complete signal path or complete signal path plus master effects, then those would be rendered as stereo. All right, Tao Taktuk. Hi, Greg. I have a Launch Key Mark III control keyboard that works well with Cubase. I bought another controller model, Easy Control. Unfortunately, I can't link it to Cubase. What do I do? So if it's to the point where you have to, maybe make I think the Novation would kind of automatically launch. Let me just turn on a controller here. So we go to controllers, I could I'll just delete this. I'm going to make a new MIDI remote script. I'm going to click on the plus sign. So you may have to choose the manufacturer. So in this case, I'm going to enter the vendor name. And we may have to just kind of create a quick layout. So we'll call this all right, and I'm going to set the MIDI input and output ports for my choice OS controller here. And so now we could go to the create MIDI. So this is a box that has like 8 faders. So we could choose whether we want it to be a knob, a fader, a button, a trigger pad, whether we want pitch bend, wheel, modulation, XY pad, and then joystick. If we want a push encoder, so whatever kind of knobs, faders, buttons your controller has. So this has like 8 faders. So I'm going to move fader 1, fader 2, fader 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now what I could do is we have our 8. We want to, in software, basically create what the layouts are for our controller. Now we have 8 faders here. I want these to be focus quick controls, and I can I move the device, assign the function. So I come here to fader 2. I want to go to quick control 2. So if you don't see your particular device, it's mapped automatically, just make it, and then in just a matter of a couple of minutes, you could create the basic layout of your controller and then assign it to do exactly what you want to do. So now, anytime that I'm working on a particular track, I could come over here to my quick controls. We'll right click. We will go to presets. I want my volume and panning. So now when I come over here, my quick controls are automatically mapped to these particular tracks and these functions within the tracks. So if you don't see it kind of automatically popping in, just simply, define it, tell what MIDI port, and then just, match up the different buttons to do exactly what the controller is laid out for, and then you could assign it to do any function in Cubase, basically. See, Al Bulger just says MPC works as a VST plugin. You just need the MPC VST driver. All right, so Jammin' and Cannon, good to see you back on from Montgomery, Texas. I was wondering if you could elaborate on the new volume control in Cubase 14 Pro. Does it work on MIDI events as well as audio? So, the intention is if we have a plugin, so let's say we have an instrument track here. All right, so now when we come here, let's say we have like existing automation on our track. All right, and we want to use the modulator. So what we could do is, instead of worrying about affecting existing automation, is that we could come over here and just say, okay, we want to go to the modulators. First, I'll just go to like the inserts, and you'll find the volume under tools. So it's a pretty simple plugin. So we'll open this up, and we will go to the modulator and say I want to do an LFO. Right now I want to assign this LFO to the volume. So now I don't have to worry about existing automation. Just this particular plugin can just come right over here. And if I wanted to change the speed of it, or I want to change the shape, so it's really, and it's not only useful for modulators, it's also very useful for, and we've had this question a lot in live streams. Oh, I want to get a lot more gain before going into a compressor. So we could just come right over here and get additional gain, or I need to attenuate the gain before it hits this particular plugin. So we could put this in the middle of an effects chain and be able to attenuate or add more gain to particular tracks. So it's an audio plugin. So if you're doing MIDI that's going to a virtual instrument, it could be routed through there. Or if the MIDI instrument is being routed as an external instrument in the audio connections, then you could use that plugin. All right, Millard Brown says, such an incredible emotion from that lovely uninvited singer. Yeah, it's a great track. I have an image in my mind what she looks like, but I've never met her. So, but yeah, she's sung on a couple of different tracks. I think she was also the singer on Beatles and Stones too. But yeah, it's a great performance and great song by my friend Vince Melmed, who's kind enough to let me use it. All right, Andre says, how would you automate the reverse panning on a channel? What an amazing option in Cubase. Thanks, Greg. All right, so let's say we'll do with kind of maybe a synth pad here. All right, so let's say we'll just put this in record. That would help. So I'm just going to hold this chord here. All right, so we have that recorded, and let's automate the panning. So I'm just going to click on W to write the automation, and we can come right over here. So now when we go to play back, If we want to set that to like an LFO as well, we could come over here. Let's do an LFO on that. Let's make it like 2 measures. We'll come over here and we'll just say, okay, let's go to standard panner. Let's do pan left, right. And we'll do pan left, right 2. So, you could set it up with LFO as well if you wanted to. So, as we come over, but yeah, all you'd have to do is just simply automate it, and you can move this up and down as you see fit, or if you wanted to do it through modulators as well. Let's see, Millard is happy I get some time off. Mark Rabin says, so the 20th is the 2024 end of year Zoom party. We should all get each other some LA2As. See, Val is liking the reverse panning trick. All right, so we see a clarification from 808 King says, meant to say macros. Let's say I make a bunch of audio drum tracks. Can I make a macro that colors everything red and all the tracks red, or something you may think is better? Thanks. All right. All right, so let's say we have tracks. All right, so let's say I have kick, snare, hat. We'll say tom 1, tom 2, floor tom. We'll say overhead left, overhead right. Okay, so let's say we have, these are drum names, and I want to take all these tracks, and I'll just put these into a folder quickly. So okay, so let's say we have a drum recording, and these are all different colors. Okay, so let's say there's a couple ways to approach this. So we could do it not through a macro, but a project logical editor. So we could say we want to transform, and we'll say our container type is a track, and we could say the name contains KICK. And then we could just insert. So we could say, okay, name. So we'll say we're going to take our track. So we'll say name contains snare. And if you're consistent with, you could say equal or exclude. Let's say hat. Okay, so let's say I'll remove this. All right, so we want to take tracks that the name contains, and we want to switch the Boolean condition here to or. So we want, if the names contains kick or snare or hat or tom or overhead. And what we want to do now is to set color, and we will set to a fixed color. So say this is red. My drums are always red. So I could come right over here and say I have this track selected. So now, and you see I had a typo here. So if I change this to Tom, it's a comma. So now every one of the tracks that have names that contain like typical drums, and you have kick, BD, bass drum, etc., different derivations. So again, if we come right over here, we want to transform tracks whose name contains these different elements, and we want to set color, and we could set it to a fixed color. Now all my drum tracks are red. And I will not have my typo here, so and you could assign a keyboard shortcut for that, and now all your drum tracks. So if you have VO, VOCA, vocal, vox, etc., lead vocal, whatever, you could have different conditions of track names and then colorize based on those particular names. Thanks for the clarification, 808 King. All right, so Manfig just says, thank you, Greg. Very interesting. So many useful techniques. Thank you. So you're welcome. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so Michael Graybill just says, upgrading my old workstation this week. Made it 10 years. That's great. But I'll be reusing a case, so I have to pre-backup first. Any advice for making sure I don't lose custom instrument tracks, presets, etc.? So usually I would just come over here and export the profile manager, and that will do most of the work for you. You could also, depending, there's preferences folders, so I'm not sure if you're on Mac or PC, but if we go to, let's say, Finder, and we come over here to Go, and you hold down the Option key, and we go to Library, you can come over here and see the application. If you go to the Preferences, and there's a similar Preferences folder on PC as well. So most of those files you'll see under Preferences, and you'll see like Cubase 14. Here's my Cubase 13 preferences, my Cubase 14 preferences all right here. So you could copy these preferences over to a USB flash drive as well, just to be safe. And congratulations on your new system. Hopefully you'll have some time over the holidays to get everything completely dialed in. All right, Matt Elston asks, can Cubase use a MIDI analog drum machine that has each MIDI channel for every individual drum sample, example, kick, snare, etc., and when play the MIDI drum required, it's addressed by channel and pitch? Yeah, so the easy way to do this, if you want to do this, if you're going to be doing this repeatedly, is to come over, let's say a MIDI track. We will come over here, and on this MIDI track, we go to, I think it's under the routing, let's go to your drum map setup. So come here, we want to make a new drum map. So now each sound, we could just say, okay, I want to, C1 is my kick, and this is, I want it to go to channel 2, and it's going out to this MIDI port. And you could do that for each of the sounds. And then once you're done, we'll just come over here. We could choose to save this particular drum map. So we'll say, okay, let's save. And we'll call this Matt Elliston. So every time that you wanted to start off with a drum map that's already kind of laid out for you, you could just say, oh, now I want to go, it may just show the empty map. Let's get to our drum map setup. We'll load. I didn't look where I did, but so at that point, like this, you know, we can just, and so once you save that as a preset, then all of that routing will automatically be preserved for you. And if you want, one of the cool things you could do is also just save that as a track preset. So when you save it as a track preset, you could just say this MIDI track is automatically loaded with this particular, with that particular drum map on it. So just make a custom drum map, and then I think you'll be all set with that, Matt. So you could have individual pitch, individual channels, individual MIDI ports if you wanted to. All right, so we see from inactive user, great to see you on. Hi Greg, how can I open extensions and how can I make them permanent on my audio clip? Okay, so let's do new project. All right, so just, all right, so now when I come over, we will do, I'm just going to change my default to EQ back to where it was. Hang on just a second. Okay, so let's load an extension. So let's say we want to do some Spectral Layers action, or let's do Wave Lab here. So now we'll double click. So I'll reverse the sample here. All right, so now that we have our extension going to Wavelab and we want to make it permanent on the file, what we could do is just come right here, and where we launched the extension from our inspector, we could just choose to make track extension permanent. And now the reverse is processed, and it's already, as we worked at it, now we're not in the ARA extension anymore. See, Mark Graben wants our Secret Santa gifts to be oversized microphones and old lunchboxes too. All right, so Tireman Guitars says, how do I make a drum map in Cubase 14? I noticed that the option wasn't there. That was there in Cubase 13. So I think it's like just what we just showed a minute ago, but just to make sure. So we'll come over here. It's under the routing area, and we'll see where it says no drum map. Go to drum map setup. Then we can make a new map. Let's give it a name. And now we could set it for whatever pitch, channel, and MIDI port you want. And then save. And now let's add a new MIDI track. And go to routing. We'll see our drum map set up right there. So now when we create an event, you double click, and now we'll automatically launch our drum editor. All right, so we see from SH says, sorry, Greg, I will email. Yeah, so please do. So you can send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, reading through comments and questions. See discussion of different microphones. See, Mark Rabin got an SM7B for $129 on Black Friday. Great deal. Tim Weinheimer wants to know when the Cubase live stream compilation album is coming out. Yeah, we used to, like at Steinberg in the early days, we used to, like one of the promotional things they did, I think maybe for the 15th or 10th anniversary of the company, is they actually, like, they had employees do a song for, and put it on, and they distribute it as a CD for different distributors and dealers. So that was kind of fun. You could hear all the people at Steinberg doing projects. But maybe we could do get a compilation of people on the live stream. We'll do a record company. We'll compete with Spotify. Right, Michael Pierce is expecting a nuage desks all around, so for the Christmas party. All right, so we have from inactive user, how can I export and import a track preset file? All right, so I think when we go to one good way of being able to find where these files are, I think that your custom track presets might be included in the profile manager. But if not, we could do is let's go to Media Bay. All right, so I'm going to make a quick track preset here. Adjust my volume. Let's reverse the panning. We'll do some channel. Okay, so we have this. I'm going to save it as a track preset. So here we could save track preset. We're going to call it December 10th. All right, so if you wanted to see where they are, so let's open up Media Bay. And we could go to user content, and we can see track presets. And we can say for audio, let's do a quick rescan on it here. All right, let me look in the right zone Media Bay. All right, so here's our December 10th, and if you right click, you could say reveal in Explorer or reveal in Finder, and then that will take you to the folder where all the track presets are. So you could copy them from that folder and put them back into the folder. All right, so we see from Lav Pran Meta. Hi, Greg. Can I convert a normal MIDI part to a pattern event? So currently not. We could do pattern to MIDI, but not a MIDI to pattern. There are some things that the patterns do that generally aren't handled in the MIDI realm currently. So we could. So currently there isn't a way to do that. I'm sure in the future there might be some way to get your MIDI parts into patterns, but currently there isn't. But the patterns can be converted to MIDI, but MIDI not to patterns at this point. Let's see, Mark Raven just says, Greg, will you play us a bunch of your music so we can enjoy life and feel inspired? I haven't worked on any personal projects in a long time. So, if you listen to the Hot Mess stuff, that's kind of like I'm proud of all the bass parts that I've done for that. But I'm not like a songwriter or a composer. So I guess if I was kind of working in more production aspects, I would maybe be more of a producer versus the songwriter. I could arrange things pretty easily and do that pretty well. And I think I have a good musical sense of how things work musically and to find out what's not working. But I don't come up with like the initial idea for a song, and I have so much respect for people that do. I can't draw well either. I can do a lot of things musically, but I'm not one to compose myself. But I just did orchestral performance on Sunday. That was a lot of fun. with the Washington Metropolitan Philharmonic. So I've been enjoying playing in the orchestra again. All right, so we see Chaser asks, hello, is there a way you can make bigger, for example, the media are on the right-hand side, only the media area where your visual files, so these are kind of fixed depending upon the screen resolution that you're running. So if you want it to be larger or smaller, you could adjust the screen size, but it's not really designed to be scalable, just so that we could have a consistent amount of visual information that's needed, and often kind of, that's often needed, and so that it's accessible for you. But there isn't a way to kind of make this, if we can kind of make this, if we want to see it larger kind of horizontally, we could set that up, but not necessarily to kind of dip like a pinch zoom or something like that. See, Mark Rabin just says, oh my God, the Christmas party is going to be amazing. We should make it a costume only. And Mark's dog Stella is excited. All right, so it's wonderful to see Steve McAndrew checking in from Greece. Thanks for joining us. Jazz Dude's giving a big woof to Stella. And Steve McAndrew's sending season's greetings to everyone. So Steve McAndrew says, did you ever get around to working out how to save space when removing silence? So yeah, I did. I think it was like the live stream after you asked it earlier. And I think I tried to recreate it at the very end of another live stream. But if you do but yeah, it can be done. So, and it was, and I could have it prepared for Friday if you send me like an email brain cramp reminder. But if you search on CubaseIndex.com, you could, it will be on there, Steve. All right, so 808 King says, hi, Greg. Hi, Greg, again. Are you used to making macros all the time 10 years ago? I'm not quite understanding how to make them now. Can you please make a simple macro, say render 3 tracks with audio to 1 file? So a lot of times, so if we wanted to do a macro, let's say I wanted to take like the range selection here and let's say drop it down like 12 dB. So I'd take this selection and drop it down 12 dB. So this was like a complicated macro that I used to make for doing debreathing, but this macro, so like if you wanted to mix down multiple tracks, I can show you a quick way to do that using, but let's say if we want to build a macro to start with. So I'll show you how to, like, mechanics of building a macro, and then I'll show you how to bounce 3 tracks down, and we don't have to utilize a macro functionality for that. But let's say I want to take this selection, and I want to take this and drop it down 12 dB. So, and this had changed in 13 a little bit. So now the macros are part of the key commands. So if you don't, like, why can't I see it? You may have to expand the macro area. So we want to make a new macro. So let's say, I want to, and let's add a command. So I'm going to take my range selection tool, and then I just want to decrement event volume. So I'm going to add that command, Let's say I'll just do it like 12 times. I'm going to give my macro a name here. Or maybe not. All right, so when we want to run this macro, I could now just come over here and say we go to macros, and that will execute all of those steps for us so that we don't have to do it one by one. Now, if we have like 3 tracks of audio, and we want to combine those down, so if I was to do something like this, I would take all of these events here, select the multiple events, and let's do a render in place. Let's get to our render settings. And since I have multiple events selected, I'll say mix down to one file, and I'll call this 808 King. So now we'll say render. And now all those will be mixed down into this one file. So you don't need a macro to do that. You might be able to make it, but I think it's probably faster doing render in place. So again, to render like multiple files down to one, you could do an export audio mix down if you wanted to. But I think the fastest approach is to now come over and do a render in place, give it a name, tell it to mix down all of them to one file. We could choose to, so if we want to mute the source events, we could just come right over there. And now everything is rendered to one file. Let's clear my throat real quick. Hang on. Right. See, Jamming Cannon's also from Texas. He says he's close to where Teams is by Texas standards. It's like how everyone in Brooklyn's around a corner from each other, even if it takes you 2 hours to get there by car. All right, Mark Rabin is asking for a free Greg concert at the Zoom Christmas party. So maybe I'll work up a Christmas carol on bass. So. Okay. All right, so we see Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. Thanks for joining us, Dwight. I see discussions. You don't have to kind of not ask questions because I have a cold, so it's no problem. All right, but let's go to some of the questions that were mailed in. All right, first question that was mailed in. It says, "Hi Greg, lately I bought an Arturia Keylab Mark III. I installed a plugin that came with it. I think the problem starts after the installation. When I start Cubase, it lingers a few minutes on VST3 plugins until it is ready to use. I tried to deactivate all third-party plugins and it worked great. How can I diagnose which plugins caused this issue? Thanks." So what I would do, if we're kind of thinking about the logic of it, if it's taking a long time to boot up after the plugins, the VST3 plugins. It's probably going to be related to plugins that were just installed, because that's logically that's the thing, the variable that has changed. So I would maybe start with the Arturia plugins and see if you do that. So you may not have to remove all of the plugins. And what I tell people to do is, go to your VST3 folder, and, just like, if the Arturia plugins are kind of, I would say, suspect, because the behavior changed just logically. The behavior has changed after that. So see if you disconnect the keyboard as a controller, if that changes anything. If it's still taking a while when the VST3 plugins are loading up and the controller is disconnected, I would go to the Arturia. I would go to the Arturia plugins in the VST3 folder and drag them out and add them like 5 or 10 at a time and restart. And eventually, as you add like 5 plugins or 10, I added this batch of 10 plugins. Do it alphabetically so you get a sense of, did I copy that plugin in or not? Do 5 or 10 plugins at a time, restart and see, those all worked. Add 10 more plugins. Those all worked. And the third batch, that's taking a long time. It's one of these 10 plugins that's the culprit. So just kind of methodically go through and slowly add plugins back in and restart and see what happens. So I wish there was kind of a better solution, but often when that happens, it could be, the culprit is outside of our realm, which is why we give you the option to deactivate all third-party plugins, so you know. All right, another question was how to add multiple sequential inputs from a digital mixer in Cubase. Like if we have 32 outputs going from a mixer digitally into Cubase via USB or ADAT light pipe, something along those lines. Okay, so let's come over here. First thing we want to do, if we have like multiple connections from your digital mixer, is go to the Inputs tab, and we want to click on Add Bus. So I'm going to add, let's say, mono buses here. And we'll add, let's say, 32 input buses. Okay, and when we do this, and we do add bus, and we add multiple monos, these will automatically increment for all of the available inputs and outputs of your device. So if you have 32 mono ins coming from the mixer via USB, this will increment all of the inputs for you. You could relabel them if you wanted to. So if you want to say mono in 1, or I'm coming from the Yamaha DM3 input 1, DM3 input 2. So you could relabel these. So I want to now come over here. Let's get rid of all of these tracks, and let's add 32 tracks. So I'm going to add audio tracks here, and I want these to be mono tracks to match our inputs. And let's say we're going to add 32. Okay, so we have all of our tracks. So the trick is we now want to assign input 1 to track 1, input 2 to track 2, etc. So we want to kind of sequentially route all of the tracks together. Okay, so when I come here, these will all be set to like stereo input as we select all of our different tracks and we look. So as we select our different tracks, these are all set. So I'm going to select all of the tracks and hold down the Shift key and set the first. Let me make sure if I did my inputs or outputs, if I didn't make a mistake. Okay, so yeah, just clicked the wrong area. So I'm going to go to the Inputs tab here. That would help. And hold down the Shift key. And we're going to say Mono In. So I'm going to select the top track here. These are all selected again. Hold down the Shift key. And I'll say Mono In. And now as we select our different tracks, if we look at the inputs here, these are just sequentially added for us for all 32 inputs, so you don't have to set them one by one, which is great if you're getting paid by the hour, but it's always easy to make a mistake. So now I'm on input 10, run channel 10, that's being set to input 10, etc. So the first thing you want to do is go to your audio connections to the Inputs tab and add your 32 mono ins. This will automatically increment the output routing. Then add your tracks, select all the tracks by holding down the Shift key, and then hold down the Shift key, select the first input, and then it's going to incrementally add and route input 1 to track 1, input 2 to track 2, input 3 to track 3, etc. All right, we had a question. When should we use the 64-bit processing precision? All right, it's a great question. And anytime we have something with 32-bit and 64-bit as the choices, there's just lots of confusion because it's kind of used, the 32-bit and 64-bit paradigms are kind of used in a lot of different areas with DAWs. So the first one that we ran into was, okay, we have 32-bit floating point versus 24-bit fixed point, like how we record the audio. All right, and we also have choices of 32-bit and 64-bit memory addressing. So we can say this is I don't want to run a 32-bit plugin. I want to run 64-bit plugins. All right, and 64-bit plugins allow you to access more computer memory beyond 4 gigabytes. Now, there's also a concept of what we call like the processing precision. Now, one of the concepts that we have in the processing precision is actually going to be set when we go to our studio setup. That we will actually, when we come over here, we go to our audio system, we could choose our processing precision here. So we could choose for it to be 32-bit float or 64-bit float. And the concept is here that we use the computer's DSP power, and the computer's DSP power is 32-bit float and 64-bit float. And we want these numbers to be higher than the audio that's been captured from the actual conversion stage. So the vast majority of converters are 24-bit converters. So if we record audio at a 24-bit resolution and do processing such as adding effects and EQs and automation, and we're altering the sound, and we come over and we have all sorts of great plugins going on. So, we have reverbs, we have all sorts of, incredible EQs, that if we have a 24-bit file, and we could think of it like a suitcase, where we have a 24-bit suitcase, and if we go on vacation, our 24-bit suitcase is completely full. If we go on vacation and we start to buy things that we want to take home from our destination, so, and we could think of our little trinkets, our gifts that we buy as our effects processing. So we have our original source material at 24-bit, and if we wanted to add more information to that audio to enhance it with the DSP processing, we don't want to, and if we're at the maximum resolution of 24-bit, we don't want to necessarily say, okay, I'm going to now fit all the extra information from the mix and the effects into that same amount of 24-bit. So when we're dealing with 24-bit, to maintain the original integrity of the 24-bit recorded audio, And if we're running it in a mixing environment with effects and plugins, we want the processing precision to be higher. So we want like 32-bit floating point for a 24-bit captured recording. Now, a lot of audio interfaces now, like the Steinberg AXR was the first one to do it. The Steinberg URC now offer 32-bit integer recording. So instead of being limited to 24-bit, these are 32-bit. So once we have 32-bit, to incorporate all the mix engine, all the DSP processing, and not affect the audio quality of the 32-bit integer, the 32 bits that have been captured, that's when we would want to do 64-bit processing. So we don't, and so when we come over, it's not about memory addressing. It's not necessarily super more efficient. Now, if you want to see which plugins are 64-bit compatible, we could come over to the VST plugin manager. And I think that as we look at our plugins, that I think it might actually show. Let's see if we go. Just see if we could extend this out. All right, so we can see that all of these plugins are now 64-bit architecture. And some of them are already set up for being ARM64. So all of your internal plugins are 64-bit processing. Now, some people go, okay, does having 64-bit precision mean that it's taking more resources? And generally the answer is no. What takes more resources is converting 64-bit processing down to 32-bit for some plugins. That takes a little more CPU processing. Not a lot, but so actually running everything at 64-bit precision will, can make it more efficient as well. Now, what's interesting is some people may go, does it sound different if I'm mixing and I'm delivering a file as a 64-bit floating point versus a 32-bit floating point? And when I did this, when it first came out, I did a test. I have my friend Greg Lukens, who's an amazing mastering engineer, probably like the best ears in the world of anyone I've ever met. Just frightening what he do, but he's a blind mastering engineer. He's a guy that actually set up like the touring systems for Rush for like during their heyday, like until 1985 or so. He designed all their live sound systems. So I sent him two files that were the same mix, and one was a 32-bit processing precision, and one was 64-bit. And I was like, Greg, tell me what you think between these two files. And he has like Meyer X10s, which are like, I think $85,000 each for his monitor systems. And he's like, this one is better, but I'm not sure why. And he had picked the 64-bit double precision. So, and it can be very subtle. So I'm not saying that everyone would notice a difference, but it does make a difference. And, Greg Lukens can hear it. So it's very interesting. So if you're doing, you can do 64-bit precision with a 24-bit captured audio, but it really becomes a necessity when we're actually working with 32-bit integer-based audio performance. So hopefully that makes sense, but it doesn't really deal with memory, doesn't deal with operating systems, just the level of processing precision. All right. All right, so we see next question mailed in. I have the latest version of Cubase Pro installed at home. I also want to install it in my studio, which I believe has Cubase Pro 11 installed currently. So I'm using the USB dongle to run it. The problem is there is no internet at my studio. So the question is, what is the best way to get Cubase Pro 14 installed there and run it without internet? So there are some offline methods of doing a license authorization. Once it's authorized, you don't need internet access. If you don't have internet at your studio or without internet, if you're able to, it can be a bit of a process to do the offline license activation, and it is detailed with a video. So if we go over to like the Steinberg site, we could do this. So just do Steinberg licensing, offline activation. And here's kind of the whole process that you could utilize with a video of how to do this step by step. If you basically generating a request file. So we could do it like this, but if you could even get online and tether from your cell phone just for 2 minutes, you could do that and still run it, and it won't do a phone home check for you. So you'd be fine to run it once it's activated on your system. You're fine to run it without worry after that. Okay, so I think we covered the next one about drum maps already. All right, so we had, I think this was sent in after our discussion last week about a link to discussion about saving presets. So it said basically when trying to save a default preset, for example, compressor, Cubase says it can't create the file, it points to a directory. When I look for this directory, I find that it doesn't exist. If I create it, then Cubase has no issue saving the preset file. So I didn't have any problems. So let's say if I come to my EQ here, so let's say I want to go to my channel EQ. And let me just open this up. And we go to save as default preset. That now, when I come over here, let's add an audio track. Let's see if I added it somewhere else. Okay, so and now when we come here, that is our default like EQ now, so that's the track we just added. And when I go to the compressor, let's say if I go to my channel strip and I go to my standard compressor, let's say I want it to be 4.5 to 1, and again we will come over here. So we just go to the compressor itself. We can save as default preset. So let's add another audio track here. And we open this up. So I see my default EQ. Let's go to the channel strip. Let's go to our standard compressor. And we can see that the ratio of 4.5 to 1 is automatically preserved there. So it seems like it's working as expected to me, but let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you have questions in the future, you can always send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. See that we've got 103 likes. Thank you very much. We've had 1,219 people view during the live stream here. All right, let's go back. All right. All right, so we see Michael Teams granted me multiple trophies. Alden Hawkins says we need more bass playing. All right, so we have Lawrence from Barn Door Recording. Says Greg, between PC and Mac, what are the different typical memory for Cubase Pro 14? I kind of think that on a PC you need to have more memory than a Mac, as the Macs come with less by default. So I really think that the memory usage, I know like when the M1 processors first came out, that a lot of people were like, oh, it's like twice the RAM of what you actually have. But I think if you're actually, if you're doing a lot of work with different sample instruments, that, it's like, if you have so much water that needs to go through a pipe, that, that pipe still needs to be a certain size for the water to go through. So I think that the requirements between Mac OS and Windows are pretty similar. But generally, when you get a Mac, it's going to be more expensive for the memory. So a lot of people opt not to do that. But I think that, really, between the two platforms, that it's not really, I always see memory as kind of like, let's say it's like your desktop, like your physical desk, and you only have so much space. No matter what you do with your, whatever you do with your desk, you can't fit another keyboard or a controller on if it's already full. But if your desk is larger, if you have more memory, more size to place stuff on your desktop, like your physical desktop, that's what memory gives you. So I think between the two of them, like I run my studio, my personal studio computer is on an i9, and I have 128 gigs of memory. My MacBook Pro that I'm using now is 64 gigs, and that was the most I could get at the time. But I think that the memory requirements and usage between the two would be very similar. But I think a lot of people, maybe on the Mac platform, justify it because adding more memory to the Mac is way more expensive. There you see Tim Weinheimer just indicating make sure you have the latest Arturia plugins and firmware. The Keylab is up to date. All right, so inactive user, how can I export and import all my custom key commands? Because I want to give all my useful key commands to a friend if that is possible. So they will be carried over in a profile manager. So you could do that. If you want to go kind of via the operating system level, if we go to, let's say, your Finder, and if you go into Windows to the application data folder, you can see on a Mac, you want to go to the libraries. On Windows, you go to application data folder. So I'm not sure which OS you're on. But then when we go to like our preferences, so on the Mac, we'll go to our preferences, and then you'll see your Cubase folder. So like here I have my Cubase 14 folder, and then there will be a presets folder, in here. And let's open the presets, and I think that they will see our key commands. So you can see all of the key command preset folders there. So you could copy just the preset folder and have them put it into the same location and manually drop it in. And then when you go to your key commands here, you'll see the presets just kind of show up right here. All right, so we see import DAW from Studio One and export because the import DAW function doesn't work. So what I did for, let's say, I'll just, when I go to import, so I'm going to do a new project first. And now when I come over here, I'm starting from an empty project. So what I found is when you go to import a DAW project, it says, do you want to create a new project? Choose no. So start from an empty one. And now we could just come over and I could import my DAW project just like that. So don't choose yes to create a new project. Just choose an empty project and choose no when asked you to create a project. And I think that should work for you. That's from Salvo. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, we see Mark Raymond has to run. Okay, so you just see question from Yassine. Let me see if I can put it into Google Translate. Give me just a second. All right, so translation is I have problems with saving keyboard shortcuts. I save my shortcuts and it works, but when I close the session, open a new project, it doesn't work anymore. Okay, so a lot of times with the keyboard shortcuts, what can be confusing about it is, so if we come over here, let's go to our key commands. So a lot of times, so I'm not sure if you're starting from a template. If you're starting from a template, make sure that you have your actual keyboard shortcuts saved within that template. But let's see if I come over here and say I load these up, and I'll just go ahead and exit. Let's see if I quit Cubase, and we'll see if those are loaded up by default. Bear with me just for a second here. All right, I'm going to start Cubase again. So these weren't there. So the preset is loaded, but it doesn't have the preset name listed. But all of these macros were in that particular preset that weren't in earlier ones. So it's loaded, but it may not show the name of the presets after it is loaded. So try that, because when we load it up, it may not show it, but those presets may actually be functioning and listed. All right. Thanks for the question. All right. Don Pryor asks, how do you use automation on multiple tracks at once? Okay, so if I have all of these, and what I could do is select all these tracks, and if I wanted to put them into what we call Q-Link mode, I could play and I could move. Let me get the right keyboard to the right computer. Bear with me. All right, so now that I'm here, I could select all these tracks. And I enable Q-Link, so all these tracks we can record the automation of. So now we go back. And let me just put it into right, that would help. And if I hold down my Alt or Option key, I could just move one. But if I wanted to link all of these together, it's just a matter of selecting all these, enabling Q-Link, and then we could write the automation for all of our tracks simultaneously. Now, if I wanted to write different values, that's when a MIDI remote is really useful. And I could just come over here, and this one, I could use my faders to control the automation parameters. So this way I could write different automation, because you may not have 4 separate mice cursor buttons to work with. So if you want to do a lot of multi-automation where they're functioning independently, consider getting a small controller. If you wanted to just write multiple tracks, consider just using the link modes and the Q-Link, and then you could just automate all of these particular tracks together just with Q-Link. All right, so Tonecaster says, I'm a longtime Cubase user doing recording and mixing, etc. Recently I started streaming and I'm having troubles controlling things with my Stream Deck in Cubase. Yeah, so let me know like exactly, so if you're doing like streaming, like where we have like I'm doing a live stream now, obviously, where my audio is going back. So, when you're utilizing the Stream Deck, you could have buttons that will switch between different programs. Like this button works in this program, this button will take you to this program and turn this function on. But let me know exactly what aspects you're having problems with. I've helped lots of people get up to speed with like streaming setups in the past. What I have for my system that I think works really well, like I've had to clear my throat a lot today. So I have my audio coming from Cubase, so I don't have to worry about sample rate changes. And I take the audio from Cubase into, I have a Yamaha AG08 mixer. And the audio from my Cubase is going out through a UR24C interface that's being fed into my Yamaha AG08 and my microphone is going into the Yamaha mixer as well. And this way I have like OBS, my streaming software that I use, is only looking for the Yamaha AG08, and Cubase is only looking for the UR24C. And that way I can be very flexible and restart and not worry about changing sample rates and stuff like that. And I have a mute button, which is good so I can cough and clear my throat. Alright, so we see from Tonecaster, it says I'm using the loopback MIDI and can control the basic Cubase function. Okay. Alright. But okay, and I just see from inactive users says, will there be now every year a new Cubase release? So next year we're getting Cubase 15 Pro. So generally they don't announce it in advance. I think that Cubase 12 was delayed because we were migrating from the USB-E licenser to the Steinberg licensing, so that put it out of its yearly cycle that was on for like 10 years or so. It was going to be like a slightly longer than a year cycle, but Cubase 13 was delayed because our online shop was, we had to change online shops to a new provider, so that delayed that. But generally, I would say the last 10 out of 12 years it's been on a yearly cycle, but we never know what's going to happen if, there's a new computer operating system that messes everything up, or a new computer processor that we need to be optimized for. So there's a lot of things outside of our external control that could be contributors to software. So, that's why we try not to announce until it's released and ready to go. All right. All right. So we see further information from Tonecaster. It says, I'm using the loopback MIDI and can control the basic Cubase functions, but when I'm trying to control my neural DSP software, amps, switching presets, etc., it doesn't work. I can't exactly tell what I do wrong. So could you just show how to set up Mapping Assistant for a third-party plugin? So it could depend on if, so let me know if the actual presets. So a lot of times when we go to presets, there are VST3 presets that we all use. They're using all of the plugins. Let me see if I have a third party. I think maybe I had a towel vocoder here. So let's open this. All right, so here we have kind of default presets. So if we do like these presets, I think that once we have this open, let's see if I come here, let's save some presets. So these will be VST3 presets. All right, so let's see if we can come over. Let's get to the MIDI remote and see if we could switch. just see if we can. All right, so let me see if we could do. So you could use, there's a previous and next preset. So I could come over here and use my MIDI remote to switch between the presets here. Now, if it's going to be, like, we can see that there's a preset system here within the plugin itself. So I don't think that that is going to be mappable. But if you load up the preset here and save it as a VST3 preset, you can navigate between the different presets with the MIDI remote from your Stream Deck. So again, just go to preset category. You'll see next and previous. And then you could use the MIDI remote to load up those particular presets for you. Yeah, so make sure that, again, that particular plugin is, because every company could have their own solution for presets. But if we just save those presets as VST3 presets, then you could access them. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. All right, so we see Jazzu just sent a invite to the. Okay, so we see from Tonecaster says, okay, thank you, gave me an idea. All right, so let's see if we have any more questions. Okay, so we see from Roland stuff. It says, I'm using the electric bass in Hallian, but A, the pan is stuck left 38, and B, the gain doesn't stay where I've set it after closing down a project and reopening it later. Any thoughts, please? All right, let's take a look. Sorry if I missed your question earlier. Okay, so let's add an instrument track. We'll do just a howling and sonic. Okay, so let's say okay, so it says the pan is stuck on L38. Okay, so let's see if it's this pan here. And let's say the gain doesn't stay where I set after closing. All right. So let's say I set it to, I'll do right 57, and we'll make it minus 3 dB. And I'll save this project. close this project. So again, we're at -3 and rate 57. So our rate is at 57. Our level is to -3. So let me know if you're doing it from directly there, rolling stuff. All right, we'll see if there's any other quick questions. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. All right, I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and tell your friends about the live stream. And we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing everyone for our Christmas celebration on next week for our Zoom week from Friday on the 20th. So thank you for everything. I appreciate everyone's help in making it such a wonderful community, and we'll be back on Friday. Please take care, and goodbye.